All right, good afternoon, everyone. This September 20th, 2022 meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is now in order. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Buck?
Here.
Councilors Winland?
Here.
Wynn?
Here.
Burdick? Here. Rapf?
Here.
Mans? Here. And Mbu?
Here.
Now, everyone, will you please stand and join us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're going to start this afternoon with a continuation from our September 6th meeting, the appeal of the DRC's approval of Type 2 tree removal application at 529 8th Street. And we will start with Attorney Boone reviewing the procedures with us.
Procedure where you are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As of course the council recalls, you had you took a public hearing. You received testimony for and by the applicant and others by for and against. And I don't know if they're neutral. And then you went into deliberations, and then we continued those deliberations. So that public hearing was held on September 6th, at which time all written and oral appellate argument from all qualified persons were received into the record, and the public hearing was closed to additional argument or evidence. The council commenced deliberation, but continued the matter for further deliberation and to permit an absent council member to participate. So I would now like to inquire of Councilor Winland. You were not present at the prior meeting. Have you reviewed the written record and the testimony of the applicant and interested persons by reviewing the video record of the proceeding?
Yes, I have.
All right, and you have not engaged in any deliberations with councils at this point?
No, I
With the
haven't.
council members at this point, thank you. Before the council continues with deliberation, I'll ask the councilors to declare, since the last meeting, except for Mr. Winland, whether you need to declare any ex parte contacts, including a site visit. And before you do that, I want to make a general declaration on behalf of the council of ex parte communications on behalf of all councilors for the following, copies of which are available in the sign-in desk, because unfortunately the IT filter did not capture post-meeting emails that were sent. From Cynthia Corbett on September 9 at 11 a.m., Martha and Leah Pullman, September 8 at 9:23 a.m., and Mark Pullman at September 8, 9:52 a.m. I think on behalf of each of the councilors, you would affirm that you will not consider any ex parte communication in your deliberation unless you're going to specifically declare those communications. So at this time, I would ask, do councilors need to individually declare any ex parte communications other than I've indicated?
No.
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 Okay. No. Does any councilor need to declare any bias on the application?
I do.
Sorry?
I do.
You do? All right. All right. If you're declaring a bias, and then that means you do not wish to, well, a bias is your vote is not driven by the criteria and the facts, okay? So just want to be clear that if you are biased, then you would not be able to participate in the proceeding.
No, as I said, in all my conscience, I cannot vote for this thing. I looked all the things that the DRC based their argument. I look at all the alternatives. I talked to staff last time. Jessica explained to us. I see that there's all legal argument we have against Renaissance Home. I don't have them, and if I go, I will go. But my conscience and my stand on this thing made me I don't want to vote for this. I have no argument to say no, so I prefer not to participate in what I call something not just. It can be legal, but it's not just. So
okay, I just want to make sure you're declaring bias for the right reason.
I
Sounds
declare
right.
it, yeah.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Winland?
No.
Mr. Nguyen? Mr. Burdick? No. And then lastly, any financial conflicts of interest to declare?
Yes.
No.
Okay. All right. And Councilor McBoop, you're going to just wait in the
Yes.
workroom, right? Okay.
Yes.
Is there any challenge to any of the council members' right to consider the application since the last meeting? Hearing none, then, Mr. Mayor, you may proceed with deliberation.
Okay, so we'll start off our deliberation again with a motion. And I'll move that we tentatively affirm the commission's decision to approve the tree removal application 499-22-000160-tree with the following conditions of approval. That of the street trees required, we require 1 large evergreen tree. Of the on-site mitigation, we require 2 large evergreens be planted. And in addition, we require the city ensures the owner maintains the health of the mitigation trees, of all mitigation trees, for a period of 12 months. We direct staff to present findings, conclusion, and an order finalizing the council's tentative decision on October 4th, 2022.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Councilor Wendland?
After reviewing the tape, which was quite lengthy, I'm going to keep my comments fairly short. As an elected official, we have different roles that we take. I think the number one role that we take is to represent the people of Lake Oswego in the very best possible ways that we can. And oftentimes that comes with either a political or a bias and all different kinds of things because of who we are. And that's natural, and that's what we should do as council when we legislate and create policy and deliberate. But we also have a unusual role as a quasi-judicial function when we took the oath of office to look at what's before us today in a judicial standpoint and not a political or a legislative role. And that precludes us from trying to figure out a better way to do it. What it puts us into is a decision of whether the processes, the staff, and the DRC followed protocol and they did their job. And so I think it's pretty, I think what I looked at and what I viewed, which is rather interesting to see a council meeting not being a participant when I should have been here and looking at it from the tape. I encourage everyone to do that every once in a while because I think what I saw in the deliberation was a lot of legislative work, which we are a body to do, but we need to do it at a different time and a different role and a different place. I think while we can agree or disagree with each other, votes count, and I'm sorry I wasn't here to make the even split in a different way. So some of you may have changed your votes. I don't know. Some of you may stick with your votes, but I will vote to uphold the DRC recommendation. I reviewed everything. I want to make a couple comments. I want to say, first and foremost, I appreciate all the time and effort that our citizens, certainly our applicant, our staff, the DRC group, they all spent a lot of time, and it seems to be a relevant subject within the city of Lake Oswego with trees. And we're going to talk about that in the future meetings when we do the review of the trees and the forest management plans and so on. And so that's a goal of this of the city council. And I think part of rules sometimes, like the tree code, is that nobody is 100% happy with it. And that means that we're probably kind of towards in the middle of the road of the subject. And it's always going to cause conversation and it's It's great that we have an active populace in Lake Oswego that cares about lots of subjects, including trees. We also have a wonderful community of builders and developers that help make Lake Oswego a great place by investing in this community and participating in this community. And I think we will all live together and we will all work things out. And so that's it for my comments.
Thanks, Councilor Winland. Councilor Wynn?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Winland, thanks for your comments. I respect your position. I respect what you've had to say, and I think that's something that I agree. There are many things that we can't all agree upon, and I think sometimes it's when we come to a point where you know, we're able to not make both sides completely happy. I think that's an indication that, you know, that we're making some difficult choices, some compromises. But from a continuation of our last hearing we had last week, I've had a chance to go back in and look at the record and also review the documents and also just really ponder it. I was conflicted then, and I'm still conflicted now. It's something that on the one hand, I recognize our role as legislators, not in this setting here, but in a different setting, but also recognize our role right now of being the quasi-judicial. So I think that while I know that we can't change the ordinance on the dais here, I think there's just some missed opportunities. I think that I recognize the hard work that our staff has put into reviewing these and the DRC's time on hearing public comment and all the public comment we've had here. So it's very much, the work is very much appreciated. But I think that, you know, where in my mind, there's just this analogy that I just keep thinking about. You can't try to force a square peg into a round hole or vice versa. And when I think about asking, when anybody comes to the city and asks for a permit, and we ask them for alternatives, I think, as a city need to be able to encourage people to come not with that same square peg into a round hole or round hole in a square peg, and encourage them to think about, instead of use that same square peg in this lot here and then use that same square peg in the adjacent lot and expect it to work. It's just one of those things where it's a missed opportunity where when we're asking for alternatives, we have to make a good faith effort to, with a straight face, and say, is this really an alternative, or is this the exact same floor plan, exact same house, just on the next lot, not considering that this next lot may have some trees that are restricted, much in the same way that we often talk about, you know, different lots in different parts of the city. Some lots, some areas where it's flat and it's easier to build them, but other parts of town where it's much more sloped and there's much more restrictions in terms of the size of the street, the steepness of a hillside going down to the lake, for example. But I think that you know, as community members, as people who want to live here, we figure out ways to make it work, and that's where I'm conflicted. Where when we look at the alternatives, I just don't feel that we've asked, staff has asked the applicant to offer an alternative other than just moving that same floor plan that's on the adjacent lot into, you know, forward a few feet, back a few feet, or whatever that is. It's just, I just wish that we could have, during the review process, asked for alternatives, not just, I mean, not to dictate what kind of house needs to be built, but look, what other ways can we do, what are the other things we can do to try to save those trees, but also, more importantly, to try to maintain the, you know, the character of the neighborhood, but also really think about, you know, what the neighbors want to see there. And so it's hard for me. I'm at this point, I haven't made a decision. I'm hoping with this discussion, this deliberation here, that we can come to a decision here. And I'm open to your comments and all my colleagues here comments here. But at this point, it's just I'm still conflicted where I get caught up on that alternatives where if it's saying, you know, again, square peg into round hole, it's like moving it forward, backward. It's not, it isn't, to me, it doesn't feel like it passes the smell test.
Thanks, Counselor Nguyen. Counselor Winland.
It's an interesting way to look at it. I think one of the things that we have to do as a council right now is take out the problem-solving skill set that we all have, and we kind of, that's our DNA, and that's what we like to do. In this case, we're being asked if the process was correct and if staff processed things correctly and if we're following the code. And I reviewed everything in here. Whether you agree with the code or not is not the question. The question is, did we follow the code and did we give the best result from a code standpoint? And if there's flaws in any of the decisions that were made that were against the code. And so that is what we need to wrestle with as a council, not whether the code is correct or not. Because we can change the code later if we choose to go down that path. That was a very long and arduous path, by the way, to come up with the tree code. We had lots of people involved in that. And if you talk to the people that were involved in it, it was a long process that yielded something that we have to work with. And you look at Lake Oswego and you can't spin around in a 360-degree circle without seeing at least 1,000 trees anywhere in Lake Oswego. And I would say that that's because of the efforts of people before us that decided that trees were important, and I think we treated the tree treasure very well. But I think today, this afternoon, we're asked as a council, did staff do their job and did the DRC do their job? And if not, then we have to stick it back to them. If they did, then we have to support their decision. And that's where, whether I'm agree that the house could be pivoted, the house could be moved, trees could be slightly altered, that's not the question. So anyway, it's a defined viewpoint that I feel we need to look at for tonight.
Thanks, Counselor Winland. So specifically to the alternatives, question, I think that it's good to keep in mind that the neighbors in this case have been thinking about this for a long time. It's been going on for a while, and they did a lot of work around considering what else could happen here, and we see in the record the alternatives that were produced. And so, and unfortunately, none of those were legal options. None of this. So after all of the thinking of all of the study by people who really, really want to see something else, they could not come up with another alternative. And so for me, between that and the staff and the work of the DRC looking at have we considered reasonable alternatives when they say, we've gone as far as we can. I mean, that gives me a little more surety that we have done everything we can. And with the enhanced mitigation going along with this, I think we'll end up with something with good results, in the end. So that's just something to, Councilor Nguyen.
No, it's always, again, Councilor Nguyen, I respect where you're coming from. And I think, and you're right, I mean, our job is not to legislate, and our job is not to decide on the dais here whether we agree with this ordinance here. But to your point, our job really is to determine if our staff did our job. And 99.999% of the time, we're always very much grateful for our staff and the hard work that's been put into the work here. But we're not perfect. And in this one instance here, I think that this would be something where I just wish that staff, in reviewing the application, would have asked those questions alternatives means more than just moving things around, right? And trying to be able to say, you know, what does that alternative mean? And asking the applicant to come up with, you know, other plans that might be able to work for that lot. So that's one of those things where, not to throw the staff under the bus, that's not what I'm saying at all. It's just sometimes we get used to doing things a certain way, and we've asked, and it's not unusual that we ask staff to, you know, when with other ordinances, with other policies with the city, you know, when we're looking at how can we be more efficient, how can we interpret our rules and ordinances in a way that better serves our community. And so, again, that's one of the things where if you, Councilwoman, if you ask point blank, ask me, do I think that the staff could have done more? I think so. And that's kind of where, as I continue to talk through this with my colleagues here, that's kind of where I'm feeling is that, you know, we've got to be able to better serve our community by making it very clear what are our objectives. Our objectives is to be able to maintain that balance between allowing our citizens to build what they want in the place they want, but also how do they align that with the existing tree code. We've got to be able to, you know, encourage our staff and equip our staff to be able to ask those questions, right? Have you really looked at alternatives? I know that, again, not to get into the business of dictating what type of house, how many bedrooms, that's not our business. But it would not be unreasonable for us to ask, you know, have you considered other plans? Come to us with another plan that would still, would at least try. I mean, because I just on the alternatives part, again, I'm not asking to change the tree code. That's for another time, another place. But I'm just asking that if we're looking at the process here, did we really make a good faith request to see alternatives? And if it's like, because I was looking through the record, I didn't see that there was anything more than just shifting the houses forward, back, sideways to be able to avoid trees and try to get the house built there. So again, it's one of those things where I hate saying it. Nothing against staff. Staff, again, like I've said, I can't say it enough. We are very much appreciative of the staff and all the work they've done. But in this case here, could there be a possibility we could have looked at this more closely? And knowing that these types of cases are bound to cause additional comment from the community members, and if we can, you know, be proactive on the front end, we might have to be able to get to these, have these types of decisions being made here, and causing so much, you know, heartache and you know, heated debate and discussion about things that should be relatively routine.
Anyone else? Okay. Okay. Let's, Councilor Burdick.
I just want to say, I think in this case, again, I'm in agreement with Councilor Nguyen in terms of I'm not sure we went the extra mile to ask for those alternatives. I don't personally see that there were alternatives in this, and so that's where I will be holding to my previous vote. It's part of an architect's job to be creative, to look at sites, to try a variety of plans, regardless of what code you're looking at, to see what's going to work best. And I'm just not sure, or I don't believe that due diligence was done, or at least I have not seen that presented in this case.
Thanks, Councilor Burdick. Okay. Ms. Linder, let's call the roll.
Mayor Buck?
Yes.
Councilors Winland?
Yes.
Nguyen?
No.
Burdick?
No.
Raff?
Yes.
And Mans?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-2.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have a motion to continue the adoption of findings on the approval of AP 22-04 to our October 4th meeting, so that we're adopting findings for both of these appeals at the same time. Would someone like to make a motion to continue the adoption of findings, conclusion, and order on AP 2204 to October 4?
Mr.
October
Mayor?
4th, 2022. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, before you do that, let me bring Councilor Mahboub back in and see if he's comfortable with voting on the motion
Okay.
or not.
Okay.
Music. We should have canned music. Welcome back.
Councilor Mahboub, I understand, based upon the previous one, and this being sort of a mirror image case, you also have a bias in this case
I
as well.
still have it. Legal doesn't mean just. This is unjust.
So I think
and
that's
I
fine.
won't participate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for purposes, I think you should not participate, even though this is just a motion to continue the adoption of written finding, just to be on the safe side. We just wanted to put that declaration on the record. So, Mr. Mayor, if you go ahead and proceed.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion to, you can,
So moved. Oh, go ahead.
perfect. That's second? Okay, is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? One abstention. Great. Okay. Motion passes 6-0 with one abstention. Okay, next we're going to move into the consent agenda.
Move to adopt,
Well, we'll go through real quick. So we have a resolution and an ordinance. We have Resolution 22-31, which is a resolution of the council amending intergovernmental agreements between the city and Metro for the sale of the Boones Ferry Road staging property for the development of affordable housing. And then we have item 5.2, which is Ordinance 2902, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lake Oswego amending LOC 12.51.015 Budget Committee regarding term length of appointed Budget Committee members for biennium budgets. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Move to adopt the consent agenda.
Councilwoman? Second? Anyone?
Second.
Second from Councilor Mahboub. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes 7-0. And now we are going to move into public comment. If there is anyone here that would like to give public comment, please fill out one of the white forms in the back and we'll call you forward. But Carol Ocker, you are first up. Come on down. And if you have a form, please give it to Ms. Linder. Hi, Ms. Ocker. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. In response to a large volume of emails from concerned residents, Mayor Buck issued a city memorandum on March 17th on demolitions and pre-existing nonconformities. Quoting from that memo, "At a minimum, ensuring that construction that essentially creates an entirely new structure that resembles nothing of the structure that stood before be required to comply with current code. We expressed a desire for only true remodels to maintain various nonconforming entitlements. Additional policy considerations around this topic are other community benefits some degree of nonconformity may engender, such as tree preservation," unquote. With that council commitment, you sent it to Planning Commission. After an open PC tour, a follow-up PC discussion, and 3 formal work sessions, here are quotes from Planning Commission's September 12th work session on the topic of pre-existing nonconformities. 2053, Siegel. "What brought this to you and what has brought us to today is really a question of, I think, direction in terms of whether we move forward." 2647, Siegel. "If the commission finds that this is still a problem that needs to be addressed, I think that's the threshold question. That's really the go or no-go question. Is there a problem here that still needs to be solved?" 3008, Acting Chair Heap. Really, what the commission is going to be looking at is, do we move forward? 3056, Deputy Attorney City Boone cuts in. I would just echo the chair's comments. First, there's a go, no-go decision to make, whether we should move something forward. What staff should have been saying, City Council has directed you hold a public hearing on the topic of pre-existing nonconformities that will establish code in line with the parameters of Mayor Buck's official memo. Now, our Planning Commission is heading to yet another work session. The earliest they might hold a public hearing is December. On this timeline, the earliest for a City Council hearing would be February. A new City Council, some of whom will have no background and no ownership. So Council Wynne, I'm sorry to say, you will be not here to give it the straight face test. This is beyond the pale. You may wonder, Council, what brings meltdowns in your City Council chamber. You may wonder what goes wrong to get Lake Oswego residents to a Parks Initiative vote. I don't want to be here in public with this message. It is a hard one to hear and an even harder one to deliver, but this was your commitment in a city memo. City staff's words, the acting chair of the Planning Commission's words, I quoted straight from the public record. I leave this mess with you.
Thank you, Ms. Hockert. Thank you.
Okay.
Alan Bazaz. Well, sir.
Yeah, Mayor Buck and council members, I'm here representing the Lake Oswego Rotary Club, a known nonprofit here in town. And we were participant in the ARPA grant applications. And I got the news that we have received some of the funds, or actually what we asked for. I wanted to mention that Lake Oswego Rotary has projects all over the world, and in addition to projects in the community. And one of the flag projects we have is called Service Above Self, Excellence in Education, and short SASE. And that's a celebration of the success of our school system here in Lake Oswego. We provide awards to students, educators in our public school system, as well as citizens in the community who go beyond the call of duty to support education and support our kids. And I can't tell you how this COVID issue affected our effort in celebrating and awarding educators. These awards usually go to forwarded to students as scholarships and awarded to projects that support the community. And we had to basically scrap the in-person celebrations and go with video, which added costs, and it affected, COVID affected our ability to raise funds. So I'm here actually to thank you and thank the city for providing this opportunity to nonprofit organizations like Lake Oswego. And our support for education will continue now stronger with the grant that's provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bazaz. Michael? No, you want to? No. Well, it's Michael Murray.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, thank you for your time this afternoon. My name is Michael Murray, and I am here today in my capacity as founder and board member emeritus of Hunger Fighters Oregon, our community's local food pantry. Later in your meeting today, as Mr. Bazaz already mentioned, you will be considering the nonprofit grants recommendations put forward by the ARPA Funding Advisory Committee. Included in the committee's recommendations is an allocation of $80,000 for hunger fighters. This funding would both reimburse the pantry for previous COVID-19 related expenses, such as PPE equipment for our staff and volunteers, and it would also fund new endeavors, such as new commercial refrigerators and freezers, additional backstock, shelving, and regular inventory purchases of canned goods, fresh produce, and hygiene items, all of which would help us serve our clients better. This funding comes at a critical time for the food pantry, as we are dealing with unprecedented need here in the Lake Oswego community. Just in the month of August, Hunger Fighters served 891 Lake Oswego residents, a 75% increase from just 3 months earlier. And to be clear, these stretch all demographics, including 20% senior citizens, as well as 35% our children that we serve. The increase in need that we are seeing is due in large part to the still developing COVID recovery, as well as inflation at the grocery markets. Right now, the United States is experiencing the biggest spike in grocery costs in 43 years. The cost of food staples like bread and cereal has increased 14%, while the cost of simple things like butter is up more than 25%. As a result of price increases like these, more and more residents have turned to Lake Oswego, or have turned to Hunger Fighters to feed themselves and their family. And so the grants under consideration today would allow us to expand our services to continue to combat food insecurity here in our community. I'd like to thank the members of the ARPA Funding Advisory Committee for their time and service that they dedicated to reviewing all the applications, and I'd also like to thank them for their endorsement of our grant proposal. And I'd like to respectfully urge the City Council to adopt their recommendation to support groups like Hunger Fighters and other nonprofits doing great work here in Lake Oswego. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. We really appreciate it. Is there anyone else who would like to provide public comment that hasn't signed up to do so? Okay, well, thank you to everyone who came to provide public comment today. We appreciate all of you. Next, we have a wildfire program update presentation. I'm going to welcome our Assistant Fire Chief, Chris Artman, to the front. And Assistant Chief, this is your first time attending a council meeting, so we want to congratulate you officially on your position within the department. We're glad that you're here, and welcome to the Lake Oswego City community.
Thank you. Is this, yep. Mayor and council, thank you for having me here. This is my first ever council presentation, so. It's going smoothly so far. Okay. This is just a very basic, brief overview, and if you have questions, you're welcome to interrupt me or wait till the end. I just tried to give you a smattering of what's going on in Lake Oswego Fire concerning wildfire. So if you have any questions, please go ahead. We can go to the first slide, please. Oh, I do it. There we go. So first of all, when we're deployed, to make sure above all that our costs are being reimbursed, we are going under either the EMAC or the conflagration declaration. So the EMAC is an Emergency Management Assistance Compact, and it's basically the interstate mutual aid. So it allows us, it's a national interstate mutual aid agreement that allows us to share resources during a disaster. And all costs will be reimbursed. And we also make certain apparatus that we send are rented out to the state or the federal government, and they do provide funding towards us that it would be net proceeds from the event. Same thing with the conflagration declaration. The governor declares a conflagration, and then we are able to send assistance to Southern Oregon, Eastern Oregon, anywhere within Oregon that's outside of our mutual aid agreements, and our costs would also be reimbursed. And by costs, I mean the personnel deployed are paid for by the state or federal government. The personnel we have to hire to fill those vacancies that are created when we send people off, that's reimbursed. And as I mentioned, certain apparatus are rented at a standard rate. And you can find all this information in the mobilization plan. But to give you an example, the battalion chief's truck is rented at $35 an hour. And we're looking at 1 to 2 week, 24/7 rentals, basically. The brush unit is $50 an hour. And if we were to get a type 3 apparatus, a larger, beefier kind of off-road brush unit, that would be about $60 an hour. Also reimbursed are any mechanical failures that occur during the deployment. So in 2020, under Chief Johnson's leadership, we made an effort to really start responding when the need occurred. We kind of partnered with Canby, so we would be able to manage our limited resources from both departments. And we responded to 5 fires, some of them outside of state and some within the state. Through these responses, we gained experience and developed relationships. And even when I was at Portland, I did hear about the professionalism and how hard the Lake Oswego firefighters worked and their level of knowledge once on scene. Often led by our battalion chief, Greg Barnum, who used to work for the Oregon Department of Forestry. So we have a lot of know-how and wisdom, especially for a city department. And in 2020, those deployments generated about $18,697.31, roughly. So in 2021, as you probably well know, Senate Bill 762 was passed, which allowed for $220 million towards modernizing and improving wildfire preparedness. And this is going to be done in 3 strategies. It's creating fire-adapted communities, which is using our prevention models, and developing safe and effective response. Also under Chief Johnson, since 2020, every one of our firefighters, lieutenants, and battalion chiefs are now certified to fight wildfire at some level, which is no small task in just 2 years. Everyone is certified. So that's part of the developing safe and effective response. That's the second tier. And the third tier is increasing landscape resilience, which is using fire ecology, drought-resistant plants. And there's a really good website, OSU Extension website has a list of fire-resistant plants. So I recommend anyone go look at it. It's pretty interesting and also will help with your water bill. So now, I already mentioned all members are certified as wildland firefighters. And then we go to 2022. And so far it's been a mild season for Oregon. We've gone to 2 fires. We sent the brush unit and the battalion chief. One was in California, one was in Eastern Oregon, I believe, or Southern Oregon. And we've done 103 home assessments. That's through our prevention division. I think we've had 154 requests and 103 of them have been completed. And just as a sidebar, those home inspections are looking at access and egress for the fire apparatus, just structural overview. Do you have a shake roof? Do you have a composition roof? Chimney spark arresters, all of those things that are going to matter in dry seasons. And also landscape maintenance, which again helps with the resilience and that third tier that we were talking about with strategies. Along with those, there's also the FireWise and neighborhood assessments. FireWise is a National Fire Protection Agency driven and USDA Forest Service driven program. If you get 8 or more households in a neighborhood, you can apply for this FireWise grant, and basically they'll help you remove excess, just help prevention and mitigation landscaping. There's also a pretty cool interactive map on the nfpa.org website that shows nationwide the current FireWise communities, and it's growing. It's our fire prevention, our fire marshals taking a really active role in continuing those. Finally, short and sweet, why should we deploy our resources when we're small and we want to make sure we're protected here at home? I think MacGyver State Park is a great example of why, because that's a small community, and if we're helping communities nearby when they need help, they will also be there for us. That's not the reason to go, but with wildfire, there's no hard and fast boundaries. So we have to be willing to train with each other, communicate, and assist each other. That gives us the best chance of doing the most good for the most amount of people. The relationships, beginning with our deployments in 2020, I've already mentioned the professionalism, the knowledgeable and hardworking reputation Lake Oswego Fire has gotten, and this has been evident in the assignments that they get when they go to these wildfires. The incident commanders know which crews they can depend on, and they know which crews they need to keep out of the way. And Lake Oswego Fire is given very important assignments, and I've heard this from other communities, not just our own people, so I know it to be true. So let's see, what else? Oh, and prevention. With every deployment, we learn more about both mitigation and prevention. We form partnerships that bring awareness to resources available from both state and federal programs. Our partnership with the Oregon State Fire Marshal is just growing, it's growing exponentially every year because of our participation and because every time they ask, we go. And that's to Chief Johnson's credit. Finally, these deployments bring funding back to our own community that we can turn around and use for buying more apparatus and helping mitigate our neighborhoods and make them fire resilient and safe, and training our firefighters so we're ready when it comes home, when it comes to our community. And finally, I'm just going to touch on our values as Lake Oswegoans and employees within this. We do it because it's the right thing to do. And excellence and service are values cultivated by gaining perspective and providing aid when requested. It's as simple as that. Our knowledge and skills and abilities grow when we exercise them and use them. And the relationships we build with the other communities will just strengthen our own community.
Yeah.
That's all I've got. Questions?
Thank you, Assistant Chief. When it comes to those home assessments, are there certain homes that are more primed for the assessment based on their location than what they're surrounded by, or is any home good for one of those assessments?
Any home is good for an assessment. Of course, the ones that are, have a lot of tree canopies surrounding them and tree, needles falling down into the gutters, we could all probably point out which homes are at the most risk, but right now it's just on a request basis. If we do go out and assess a home, often generate questions and buzz, so we'll spread the education and the value, but right now we're just going off the website and it's a request basis.
Okay, that's great. Councilor Mance.
Thanks for the short and sweet presentation. You hit the points. I appreciate that. Since 2020 particularly, and prior to that, I know there's been much talk about fire, and in our urban treed community, we do have a lot of trees. We back up to a state park that has a lot of trees. Fortunately, a lot of the undergrowth there is managed, I guess you would say, for better or worse. But I have to commend the department for all that they have done, and all of the department, all the way up from the bottom to the top. There's never been a time where our fire department hasn't come forth and told us of the dangers and made it perfectly clear and not sugar-coated, for example, fireworks or what the fire hazard is in our community. And as the thinking community that we are, I truly appreciate that and know that it will continue on into the future. Sadly, from the fire standpoint, but
Yeah.
glad to know that you're on the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Mans.
Counselor Mans, Counselor Wendland.
Good job, first presentation, and I'm sure you'll be making more as time goes on.
Thank you.
I guess my question, do we have, with the Firewise program or whatever that, and the neighborhood assessments, do we put in hello newsletter that homeowner associations or neighborhood associations, we have welcome to Lake Oswego, we have a lot of neighborhood associations that are very active and
Yeah,
engaged.
that's a great idea. I don't know if it's been done.
And
It has been done.
Yes, okay. I think it would be especially worthwhile around now when it's 90 degrees almost in September and there's still some fires that I know in the last couple of years we've worked with Chief Johnson to get the awareness of fires, and then we did the fireworks policy, and we're getting a little bit, I think, more community awareness about fires. I think it might be good to reinvest some time into getting some neighborhoods assessed, because once they get involved, you have a better chance of having more helpers out in the community.
Yep.
And then I guess the other question is, should we be in the equipment rental business? Should we be buying a couple more pieces of equipment and renting it out? Does it pay off, or?
Well, with this grant, we have applied, and I believe it's been approved. We're going to get a Type 3 brush unit, and as Chief Johnson explained it to me earlier today, the Oregon Department of Forestry will actually own the equipment, but it's housed here, so we get it for 4 years, and we will deploy with it. So we won't be, we do pay the upkeep, but we don't have to pay for the apparatus itself. So yeah.
Well, I just think it's great that we have the equipment because, as Councilor Mann said, we have a lot of trees and forests around us. And I think it helps us not only to help other neighbors, which I agree at the bottom line is helping each other is the most important thing that we can do for each other. But as importantly, we have possibilities in this city that I hope it never happens, but the more prepared we are, the better. And that's one of the things that, we keep talking about emergency preparedness. And this is one of those things that I think we need to keep our eyes on as a city. So, but thanks very much for the information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wendland. Councilor Burdick.
First, I just want to say welcome.
Thank
We're thrilled
you.
to have you, and great presentation. I don't have a lot to add, but I just really wanted to personally welcome you.
Thank you.
But I will say, just to Councilor Wendland's point, I think reaching out directly to the neighborhoods, even if it's already been done, probably doesn't hurt, because if you get some of those going, there's no stopping them.
Wildfire.
Yes, so definitely that would just be my input, but also just thanks to the entire department. We're so lucky to have such a professional, wonderful department that really looks out for our entire city and beyond, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Burdick. Councilor Boop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She's my playmate. I'm so
Soccer.
happy. Soccer, we play. Yes, yeah, we play. We don't say soccer, we say football.
Football.
Yeah, and so thank you for your presentation. And yeah, I always think that Lake Oswego need the fire department we have. I'm a friend of the fire department, of all the folks. I'm just asking because lately we know that fire has been something that's very devastating around the world, and especially in America, but around the world. In France, this year it was very bad.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's and when you see that, and we live in an area like Lake Oswego, you just it's very scary sometimes. And I'm just saying, I hope that the city is giving you the equipment you need in case of those emergencies, that you can stand up and fight that, and also in terms of the people you have, also the bodies you need in case of a fire, because I talked to some of the employee in the department, there was, we are talking about some, I think the International Association for Fire Department says that this is the number of bodies we need in each station at every time of the day. And I hope all those questions are solved in Lake Oswego, that we are ready to fight when this thing happens. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Boop. Well, thank you, Assistant Chief. We really appreciate you coming to us with this presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Well, next we are going to welcome Ms. Taylor to the front to give us a report on the ARPA nonprofit grant recommendations from the ARPA Funding Advisory Committee. And we have several of the committee members joining us on Zoom.
Yes, thank you so much, Mayor and Council. Good afternoon. My name is Charity Taylor, and I'm a management analyst here with the city, and I am very pleased to be here before you this afternoon to discuss the ARPA nonprofit grant recommendations. Before I do, I think we might have just Dr. Carson on the line. I wanted to just give her a quick shout out before we begin. Just to let her know that we are coming for you. I'm going to give my brief introduction. I'm going to get right to Dr. Carson. But first, what I wanted to do was just to thank all of the nonprofits who applied for this funding. We know that it takes a lot of time and attention and dedication and effort. So thank you for going through this process for these funds. And then second, to our ARPA Funding Advisory Committee. These folks have been meeting since December of 2021, really diligently making sure that this process is as easy as possible for the nonprofits. And so just wanted to list them by name. We have Patty Mertz and Tracy Chapman, who are also members of the Tourism Advisory Committee. Jason Bush, Megan Tien, and Kim Vito of the DEI Advisory Board, and then also Teresa Newt and Dr. Lynn Carson, who are also members of the Budget Committee. And so with that, what I wanted to do is just give Dr. Carson, because I believe her time is short with us today, if she wanted to provide just any quick insights before we begin the presentation.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Well, I heard the two testimonies just now, and it is very gratifying to hear that these funds are going to be used for those two programs. And I feel that both Jason and Tracy and I and Megan spent a tremendous amount of time together, probably about 6 hours, just talking about all these different nonprofits around Lake Oswego. So the decision to fund these nonprofits weren't taken lightly. We went through with a fine-tuned comb, and we went through all the different scenarios and applications, and we asked extra questions. So today I come very confident and very happy to let you know that we did a really good job in terms of dispersing these funds. And we feel very comfortable as a committee that these are the amounts that we would like to disperse to these different funds. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for giving us the chance to work on this together.
Thank you, Dr. Carson. We appreciate your work on this committee, your service on the Budget Committee, and thank you for making the time to be here today.
Yep, let me know if any of you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate those words. So what we'll do is we'll kind of take it back in time just a little bit to talk about what is the American Rescue Plan Act. So ARPA was signed by Congress in March of 2021, and really the goal was to aid recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that just because, our nation is in a different phase of this pandemic, there's still businesses, schools, local governments that are struggling to make sure that we are still offering the top quality services that our residents expect of us. So nationwide, $130 billion was allocated to local government governments. And of that, the city of Lake Oswego received $8.8 million. And of that, see the funneling here, $600,000 was allocated by this council for the nonprofit grant program. Of that $600,000, staff is recommending that there be a $50,000 allocation to the Lake Oswego Chamber of Commerce, and that is just for them to continue their tourism and economic development efforts. And so additional details will be coming about the specifics on that, but we will be before council again, but staff is recommending that. And then the remaining $550,000 did grow through the application and evaluation process. Speaking of that process, back in October of 2021, council did establish the ARPA Funding Advisory Committee, really with the goal of establishing additional eligibility requirements if needed. Council had discussed having these funds go towards nonprofits that support tourism and also nonprofits that support individual Lake Oswego residents. On top of that, the Funding Advisory Committee also stated that a guideline would be to have these funds spent within 18 months, just to make sure that that would be expended in advance of the federal deadline of December 31st, 2026. Additionally, the advisory committee helped to create a streamlined application. Again, always making sure that the nonprofits are front of mind, knowing that not all nonprofits have a dedicated grant manager, and making sure that this was an approachable and equitable process. And then also conducting nonprofit outreach. Again, that's kind of just about making sure that the nonprofits knew to come to a local government as a source of funding for the work that they do, because it's not always often that there are grants of this magnitude available for nonprofits. So making sure that we did do intentional outreach. And then we also created a subcommittee to review the application proposals, and then the entire committee voted on the recommendations that we'll get into this afternoon. A little bit on the application structure. So there were two types of grants that nonprofits could apply for. First is reimbursement. So that would be for expenditures related to operational costs, so things like rent, utilities, anything to keep the lights on, so to speak, whatever that would mean for each individual nonprofit. And those expenditures could only be from January 27, 2020 and forward. And nonprofits could also apply for programming. So that's grants for things related to tourism or benefiting individual Lake Oswego residents. So any type of services that those nonprofits provided. So nonprofits could apply for either reimbursement, for programming, or for both. We did have a three-pronged outreach strategy, which included print media. So we're thinking, like Lake Oswego Review and Hello Hello, the LOSD school newsletter, and then social media. So the city's outlets, that includes our city website, Facebook, Instagram, Nextdoor, Twitter. So advertised as many places as we could, and then also direct outreach to community-based organizations as well. So for example, Latino Network and Urban League. So after the nonprofits submitted their applications, again, a subcommittee was created, and that subcommittee did an initial review of the applications and came up with some specific questions for each nonprofit. And then those questions were sent to all the nonprofits, and they had a chance to respond. And then after we got those responses back, the subcommittee reviewed those responses along with the original application and then scored all of the proposals. So some of the scoring considerations, the bullet points that you see here are factors that were considered when looking at all of the applications for this grant program. So that included, again, making sure that the nonprofits either promoted tourism in Lake Oswego or assisted Lake Oswego residents, establishing that there was a negative impact, and that impact was negative impact was caused by COVID. So for example, a nonprofit might have experienced a negative economic impact because of lack of fundraising due to COVID, or maybe that nonprofit did not experience a negative economic impact, but they served people who do. Also wanting to make sure that the use of funds was actually related to that negative economic impact, and then making sure that that response is proportional to the impact. So for example, if someone said, hey, we we are behind in our rent by $10,000, so now we are requesting $100,000. Well, not quite proportional. So that's just an example of what it means to make sure that the response and the request is proportional. So with that, what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and get into all the nonprofits that applied and just kind of give you a quick run through of all of them, and then we'll just have time for questions. So first up was Big Stuff Library. And so what was great about going through all these proposals, just as a quick note, is that all of these nonprofits are doing such amazing things. So it really was fun and very gratifying to go through all these applications. And so Big Stuff Library is actually a nonprofit that was seeking to reduce redundant consumption by circulating large household items. So think about if you have a party and you're looking for folding tables, not everyone has folding tables, so they would rent those out, or supplies like a chainsaw or just different things like that. So they were seeking programming funding in the amount of $220,000. They were not eligible for funding due to programming guidelines, as they were not in existence at the during kind of like the intense part of the COVID-19 pandemic, and haven't quite started their services. So just wanted to bring that to light as well. But an amazing nonprofit. Chinese Friendship Association of Portland. Their mission is to build a bridge of cultural awareness and understanding. They provide civic training for youth, and they also assist Chinese immigrants who are new to Oregon. So their total amount requested was a little over $100,000. They did apply for both reimbursement and programming. So the subcommittee and the committee, again, the committee voted on all of these, voted to award them with $42,560. And so that breakdown is $10,000 for reimbursement for personal protective equipment, and then a little over $32,000 for some programs that they would like to put on, including their Mid-Autumn Festival and Lunar New Year Gala. Hunger Fighters of Oregon. So this, you've also heard from Mr. Murray about all the wonderful things that Hunger Fighters is doing. And so again, local here to Lake Oswego, providing nutritious food for those who are experiencing food insecurity. They requested a little over $80,000, and they were also awarded that full amount, and that would go towards reimbursement for food, PPE, and internal consultant, just with them having to deal with an increase in need for their services. And then also a little over $50,000, which will go towards pantry organization, getting commercial refrigerators, and then also ensuring that they have ADA compliant volunteer equipment. Lake Oswego Meals on Wheels. So this nonprofit, they are here local to Lake Oswego and deliver meals to our senior residents and residents with disabilities, and also providing meals in a congregate setting. And so they requested $86,572, and they were awarded $78,572. And so only reason why they were not fully funded is because we had some nonprofits, including Lake Oswego Meals on Wheels, request funding for lost revenue due to fundraisers. We decided not to do lost revenue due to fundraisers because it's kind of hard to gauge how much funding is lost from a fundraiser that didn't occur. But what we did say is that we can help with reimbursement for anything that you had to pay for during COVID, and also help with future programming. So with Meals on Wheels, they're receiving a reimbursement for their program costs during this time frame, and then also for future fundraising efforts. So that is our Lake Oswego Meals on Wheels. Next up, we have the Rotary Club of Lake Oswego. So they requested a little over $14,000. And as you heard Mr. Bizaz discuss, they had to do an online event in 2021. And so $9,280 of what they've been awarded would go towards reimbursement for that virtual program, and then $5,000 for future programming. Friends of Tryon Creek, their mission is to inspire every community to identify, cultivate, or reclaim their relationship to nature. They were seeking a total of $114,000, a little over, for reimbursement for payroll, and then also for their Indigenous Culture Day. The committee decided to fully fund the Indigenous Culture Day and then award them 25% of their payroll reimbursement. The Oswego Heritage Council, as many of you know, beloved Oswego Heritage Council is dedicated to the preservation and promotion of the history and culture of Lake Oswego. As we know, there's also a museum and they offer free lectures to the Lake Oswego community and beyond. They had requested a total of $188,000 from the nonprofit grant program, and they received $116,000. So initially, Oswego Heritage Council had requested about $70,000 in lost fundraising revenue, and so again, we decided to kind of put that aside and focus on reimbursement and future programs. So they received about $77,000 in payroll reimbursement, and then about $40,000 to increase their part-time employee to full-time, and then also to fund expenses for a future car and boat show. Next up, we have Respond to Racism. So they initially requested just programming funding, and so that would be for a total of $70,000. The committee voted to award them $40,000 for educational programs for adults, for children, and youth. And so one of the things that I wanted to stop and mention right here is that with the totality of all of the nonprofits, including the chamber, we were able to allocate about $551,000. And so what is remaining is about $48,000. And so the committee did say that they would like to look at a couple of nonprofits again and see if we can get additional information to see if we can allocate even more funding to them. And Respond to Racism is one of those nonprofits. So what the committee has suggested is looking at the remaining $30,000 that they requested. And so that would be for phase 1 of an art project that they would like to do. And this is something that they are in partnership with our library and then also our arts council to do, and it would be cited outside of the library. So phase 1 is $30,000. And so what our committee is requesting is to go back to Respond to Racism and ask if there are any cost estimates to make sure that the project has been appropriately scoped and that the $30,000 would actually fully cover what they're asking for. Any questions on that? Just want to make sure. Councilor Winland?
Can you kind of explain like what the educational programs for adults, children, and youth would be? I mean, is it something that they need to create? Is that something that they have going already, or is that a?
Yes. So it is a mixture of both from what I can tell. So for example, for children, they have a story time and multicultural experience. For youth, they have a youth empowerment committee. So it is just kind of continuing on what they're already doing.
Okay. So over the long term then, or do we have to use these funds within a certain time period?
So the program requires, as the committee set out, that they would use it within 18 months, and so that's well in advance of the actual federal guideline of the end of December 2026.
So what will the, so the committee is going to automatically review those two for more information, the Respond and the I Love Lake Oswego?
So that would actually be up to council this evening, as if the committee, if you would allow the committee to go back into re-engage Respond to Racism, and then also the next nonprofit that we'll talk about, which is I Love Lake Oswego. And then if we re-engage and the money is given away, then that happens, and then the remaining will go to the chamber. The other option is just to give those funds to the chamber, but wanted to make sure that those nonprofits had that option, because that was what the committee recommended, was to re-engage these nonprofits first.
Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions? Okay. So next up is I Love Lake Oswego. So this is the other nonprofit that the committee recommended going back to and getting additional information from. So I Love Lake Oswego is actually a student-run clothing closet, and they also provide hygiene items. So they initially requested $15,000, and they were awarded $3,000. And so what the committee wanted to do was to go back to I Love Lake Oswego and ask for specifics in terms of how they would use additional funds if they were awarded those funds within that 18-month period. And so just getting a bit more information from them to see if we can further support them. Next up, we have Lakewood Theater, and so they requested $60,000 as reimbursement for an HVAC unit replacement, and so they were fully funded. It's a pretty cut and dry application, so really not much to say there, but the committee decided to fully fund them. Next up, we have the Lake Oswego Preservation Society. So the total amount that they requested was $5,371. They were awarded $4,035. And so that $4,035 would go towards their rent, utilities, insurance. The only reason why they weren't fully funded, the amount of $5,371 was because, again, for lost revenue. Other than that, everything else is completely funded. With Love Oregon actually supports foster families who take in kids who are from ages 0 to 6. And so they actually requested $14,000 and they were fully funded, $14,000 from the committee. That reimbursement will go towards warehouse supplies, program support staffing, and then also foster parent gift cards that they bought throughout the pandemic. Lastly, we have the Lake Oswego Rotary Club Foundation, which is the administrative arm of the Lake Oswego Rotary Club. They requested $8,260, and that was for reimbursement for hybrid meeting equipment and Wi-Fi costs, just again, kind of adjusting to the COVID pandemic and not being able to meet in person. So that is really the conclusion of all of the nonprofits. I know that was a lot, so please feel free to ask any questions. So just to kind of recap again, the recommendation is to improve the ARPA nonprofit grants as laid out in attachment 4 in the packet that you have before you, again, with the idea that the committee would re-engage Respond to Racism to see if we can get a cost estimate on that art project, phase 1 of it. And then also going back to the student-led clothing closet, I Love Lake Oswego, to see if we can get some more detail about how they would use additional funding within an 18-month period as laid out in the guidelines for the grant program.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Taylor. I think the work you and the committee did on this really was fabulous, and the matrix, the scoring criteria that you used, really good. I think could be a template for how we do other grants. I know we've been working through how we dole out some of the other municipal grants and such. So just really impressed with the diligent work, and it makes this obviously much easier for us because I know these are all great organizations, and so thank you for doing all that legwork.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Mans.
I second that motion. What a tremendous amount of work, and the professionalism that went into all of this was incredible. And thank you, of course, Ms. Taylor, for your leadership. Sometimes a little bit like herding cats, I'm sure, but thank you. It was cats.
Cats, yeah.
Yes. Stop. But it was amazing, the work that you did. I did have a question on the Lake Oswego Preservation Society that I should have asked, seeing as how I was sitting in those meetings, but I completely forgot. They're still headquartered in the workers' cottage, are they not?
They are, yes.
And they pay rent.
Yes, of $100 a month. So they're only requesting about,
okay.
I think, $1,200 in reimbursement for their rent.
Right, that's what I thought, but I knew I had forgotten to ask that question at some point in time. Again, thank you, and obviously thanks to the entire committee for all of their work.
Councilor Raff.
Thank you, Mayor. Two things. First one is administrative. Mr. Mayor, do we need to, can we, by voting yes on this, are we voting yes to allocate it as well as them going back and looking into Respond to Racism and all that? We don't need to split it up?
Yes.
Cool, okay. Second, which is the most important one, amazing work, Charity, as usual. Lynn and the rest of the committee, you guys bang up job on this. I just wanted to say I'm so proud of that we're able to allocate these funds as a council and as a city. Especially especially to such great organizations that are, like Mr. Murray and the gentleman from the Rotary Club said today, they're here to make they exist to help Lake Oswego be wonderful, a wonderful place to live, a wonderful place to play, a wonderful place to grow up. And that's why Lake Oswego is the best city in Oregon, and probably in a lot of among other places, right? So really, I mean, this to me just warms my heart that we're, one, able to help them out, and they do such great work. And I would just more of a blanket request to anybody watching, of the 5 people watching, and maybe the couple people here, but most people here are already doing it. But look, get involved, donate your time to help Lake Oswego be great. Either run for city council or join one of these great nonprofits. I mean, I'm just really excited that we're able to do this, and that we have such great people in the community that want to move everything forward. So,
Right, yeah. Thank you, Councilor Raff. That's great. Councilor Moop?
Thank you, Charity. Jackie and I were the representative for the council, and yeah, I missed some meeting. I was on vacation, but I just want to say thank you. Really, Charity, you are doing a wonderful work, and all the city manager office, it was not easy to come to, the criteria that we would all agree upon to, award all these grants. But like Councilor Rapp said, we have a great community. I was shocked by the number of nonprofit. And by the way, I have one, but because of my position, I could not apply. I wish I could, but I was now we won't apply. So thank you for your work, and I second the motion. I think it's wonderful. You did a wonderful work, and all these nonprofits, we should encourage them. And the 2 who are here, Mr. Murray, and thank you for your work. It takes people like you to move our community forward. And I agree, Lake Oswego. Sunday showed that we are the best city in the country. Sunday, you come, you listen to Cuban music, to Mexican music, to see the Asian community everywhere. I think, thank you, Charity.
Thank you, Councilor Boob. I want to, in the interest of full transparency, make a couple disclosures here in regards to some of these organizations that I'm a part of. I know, yeah, and if anyone else. Yeah. So just
No, before you go, I am also a board member of Respond to Racism, and I declared that bias. I was not there when they're awarding them anything. I just know today how much, so that it's clear, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Boob. I'm a board member in the Hunger Fighters Oregon, and a member of the Rotary Club of Lake Oswego, and a member of the Chamber of Commerce, but also had nothing to do with the submission of any of these grants or the evaluation of them, but just in the interest of full transparency. Councilor Burdick.
I also just want to be transparent and say I am a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and I also sit on the board of the Preservation Society. But I was not part of the
Councilor Lynn.
Here.
Yes, I too am also a member of the Lake Oswego Chamber of Commerce, and I too was not part of the decision-making, so.
Councilor Wendland.
I'm just a member. I'm not a board member. I'm just a member of, as a business.
Same with me.
Okay.
For the chamber. And also, Charity, everything that you do in this city, I just want to compliment you on the great job that you do. And I'm very appreciative of the in-depth analysis that you do for everything. You get into the weeds, and it gives me great confidence that the output that you help as Herding the Cats is great quality work, and it's setting the standard for Lake Oswego. So you're one of the standard bearers, so just keep going, keep making it happen, because every project that you work on, it's really fun to hear and how well you've done on it. So thank you. And I think, to everyone's point, it's a great thing that Lake Oswego has the opportunity to do this. Not many places can do this, and it's really kind of it's a reflection on our city, how engaged people are. So,
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councilor Wendland. Councilor Mans?
Full disclosure, I do not sit on any of these boards. Therefore, as a member of this committee, I was front and center to make sure that there was no malfeasance and that we had total transparency.
Thank you, Councilor Mans.
You're
You're a
welcome.
watchdog.
Absolutely.
The watchdog, though, not the watch cat.
So do we move?
Okay, yes.
Do we move to approve the ARPA nonprofit grants as recommended by the ARPA Funding Advisory Committee?
Second.
Okay. Carrie be the tiebreaker there.
Give it to Rachel.
All right, any further discussion? Right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes 7-0. Information from council. Does anyone have any information to pass? Councilor Mans. Oh, you want to go? Yeah, go ahead.
I had a little light and it went away. Just a little light. Just wanted to report on, I was at the Car and Boat Show, both working it for Willamette Falls and Landings, walking around. It was very well attended this year. Quite exciting to see. Great collection of Jaguars out there as always, as well as muscle cars and whatever else you wanted to see. Aaron's nodding his head, he was there. He was there. The Planning Commission, I was unable to attend, took a tour of Palisades neighborhood where there sits a group, they want to do an overlay, or they're talking about doing an overlay, the neighborhood of houses that are mid-century, built mid-century, retaining a lot of their mid-centuryness and really reflective of that era. That is in the very, very preliminary stages, but the Planning Commission took that tour, as well as, that's it. I'm done.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mans. Councilor Booth.
I'm talking about charity again. Saturday, we went with the Youth Leadership Council to Camp Telecom and did some zip lining. Yeah.
Well,
the mayor, everyone, we were jumping around with the kids and have some leadership stuff. So thank you, Charity, again. It's really good, the work you are doing again. And I can also talk about the intercultural. It was amazing what happened Sunday in Lake Oswego, honestly. Everybody was happy, and the turnout was so big. And, I thank the police, the fire marshal. They were there. I was with fire. They did a wonderful work there. This is a city you want to live in, honestly. So, yeah.
Thanks, Councilor Booth. We sent on less fun topics, I sent a letter to the Oregon Transportation Commission around the amendments they're doing to the Oregon Highway Plan around the toll policy work. The letter was focused specifically, so they had an open comment period. The letter was focused around how they're defining traffic diversion. So the city remains engaged with other cities throughout the region. Our staff, Ms. Rooney and her team are very engaged on this topic with their colleagues in the other cities. In the fall here, they will come out with a draft environmental analysis on the whole I-205 project, and there'll be then a 45-day comment period. So that's going to be very technical analysis. The staff will be, combing through that, testing those numbers, because from that will come kind of the ODOT's assessment of what diversion or what mitigation work needs to be done. So that's going to be kind of the next step, where there's going to be a lot of engagement and kind of working through how we're going to ensure that, roadways in LO that already in many cases are impacted by diversion from I-205 and just congestion in general, or that we receive some mitigation dollars for projects on those. So it kind of starts with the policy work and the highway plan, and then continued advocacy from there. But the main point being that there's a lot of good work going on at the staff level, especially, and of course, elected leadership is very engaged on this as well. Councilor Boop and I welcome it's kind of the new cohort of the Youth Leadership Council at the kind of kickoff retreat this past weekend, and we had a lot of fun. It's a good group. We've expanded the Leadership Council to a larger number of kids, I guess, for the first time this year, and it just keeps growing. It's very popular, and then of course in a couple of weeks, I'll be joining Happy Valley and Oregon City at the League of Cities conference down in Bend, speaking about youth engagement. So it'll be great. Anyone else have any updates? No? Okay. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Evan.